Greetings, and welcome back. I'm Black, the only author who has ever written any books by me. I am filming this part of the series in a different location to indicate that Rhysand is a completely different character than the rest, and not because I was kicked out of my filming place because people were needing to have a meeting there. So today we're going to finish up the series for now with part 3 of the greatest characters of all time. I'll be introducing one of my favorite characters of all time, Rhysand. Now, I'm going to have a disclaimer, like all the other ones. There are major plot points that are revealed in this series, but a second disclaimer is going to be added here, because if you want to read the series, note that this series is definitely not for kids. The other two are. Young adult, they're fine. But this one is extremely violent and has some graphic sex scenes. While it's still a fantastic story, it should be reserved for teens or adult consumption. Let it be noted that I've left a lot of parts out of the plot because this book isn't a book report, it's an analysis of Rhysand. Rhysand is a fairy, a sort of elf-like race of beings who populate a land called Prythian, which is divided into 7 nations, or courts: the day, dawn, night, winter, summer, spring, and fall courts. Rhysand appears as a normal person, generally, with pointed ears, though, and a lot darker skin. He's supposedly extremely handsome, but he can also appear in his animalistic form with enormous bat wings as well. Very close to the traditional representation of a demon, which is very interesting and plays an interesting part in this book. He first appears in the very first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses. His first appearance is in the Spring Court, where the main character, Feyre, a human, is staying with the Lord of the Court, Tamlin, who is also a fairy. Tamlin eventually becomes Feyre's love interest. Rhysand first appears when he saves her at a ceremonial celebration from 3 fairies who were harassing her. While he did save her, he was intimidating in the process, and Feyre had a very bad feeling about him, especially when he asked to escort her away. She turns down his offer, but before she leaves, she asks him if he is part of the Spring Court, to which he replies proudly that he is in fact not. He is part of one of the other courts. I wonder which one. Later, we find out through a gruesome message, a branded head on a pike, which appears overnight in Tamlin's castle, that Rhysand is in fact part of the Night Court, an infamously dark court filled with corruption and cruelty. Rhysand then visits the Spring Court again and has a very forced political conversation with Tamlin, in which it is evident that they both hate each other. Rhysand makes some remarks about Tamlin and his pathetic court, while Tamlin calls him Amurath's whore. Amurath is the male violent queen of all Prythian, who has every king of each court under an iron fist. All the relative happiness and peace Feyre had experienced in the realm up to then had actually been an illusion. Tamlin ends up actually telling Rhysand about Feyre's existence, and when he next confronts Feyre and asks her name, she gives him a fake name. Actually, the name of a friend she had in the human world. Amurath finds, tortures, and kills said girl. Turns out Rhysand knew it was a fake name and told Amurath anyway. Despite what Tamlin believed, Rhysand was actually trying to help Feyre for his own purposes. Feyre actually is a very important character because not only is she the protagonist, she is also the girl of the prophecy, which is not exactly important right now. She's just an important character to all of these people. They want to make sure that she is either killed or protected due to the prophecy. Eventually, Feyre does get captured by Amurath, and has to go under a series of torturous trials in Amurath's lair, as Tamlin and the other fairies are forced to watch. During one of the trials, she gets a nasty infection from a wound. Rhysand secretly aids her under one condition. She must travel to the Night Court, which he rules, for 2 weeks of every month to spend time with him. Out of desperation, she accepts, but only after she negotiates it down to 1 week. Rhysand heals her infection, and she can go about with the trials once more. To keep up the illusion that Rhysand is actually on Amurath's side, he brings Feyre to many different parties as his personal trophy. At the end of the book, Feyre ends up killing Amurath, but she is mortally injured. But Rhysand convinces the other Fey Lords to gather together and use their combined magic to heal her, turning her into a fairy in the process. Feyre and Rhysand actually part rather amicably. Feyre is still upset at being forced to spend a week every month with him in the Night Court, but grateful that he had helped her. She then leaves with Tamlin back to the Spring Court, where they live happily ever after. That is, until the sequel. I am wearing different clothes to signify the passing of time between one book and the other, and not because my roommates were being really loud and I had to wait till the next day to record. Rhysand plays a huge role in the sequel, A Court of Mist and Fury. During the first 3 months of the book, actually, though, he's completely absent. He doesn't come up to pick up Feyre for her obligatory 1-week visits out of each month. However, tensions are beginning to rise in the Spring Court, and Tamlin becomes extremely overprotective of Feyre, even going so far as to imprison her in her own castle. She begins to fall out of love with him. Right as Feyre and Tamlin are about to get married, Rhysand actually crashes their wedding. Feyre had gotten cold feet and asked Rhysand through the psychic bond due to their pact in A Court of Thorns and Roses to help her get out of it. He takes Feyre to the Night Court, which actually is a very nice place. Rhysand had put on the illusion that it was evil and dark so that he could keep his court and subjects safe. Feyre, over time, ends up deciding to stay in the Night Court and gets introduced to Rhysand's inner circle, his friends. Azriel is by far the coolest of the bunch, being a spy master and a shadow singer. Rhysand reveals that trouble is brewing with the country of Hybern, and their king is getting more and more powerful, and is intending to take over Prythian. Over the months of staying in the Night Court, Feyre begins to fall in love with Rhysand, though she won't admit it to him. Eventually, through a series of visits to reclusive prophets and braving their tests, Feyre discovers the means to defeat the king of Hybern using an ancient book. They then travel to the Summer Court to try to discover the location of the book. Tamlin is not pleased with this, but meets with them under tense political grounds. Tamlin eventually discovers the Night Court's betrayal of the other courts, publicly denounces Rhysand, and even goes as far as to demand their deaths. Rhysand is deeply troubled by this and regards this as a personal failure. At this point, Feyre has fully fallen for Rhysand. During one of his recreational flights, Rhysand is hit by a Hybern soldier's arrow, who had infiltrated the Night Court. Feyre finds the antidote from a priestess and discovers, too, that she is Rhysand's mate, essentially a soulmate. She accepts the mating bond, and Rhysand and Feyre live happily ever after. Not. During a fight with the king of Hybern, Tamlin eventually comes in to rescue Rhysand and Feyre, but on one condition. He requests Feyre's return to the Spring Court. She agrees, but only to spy on the Spring Court, who had originally betrayed them to the king of Hybern. Again, the change in shirts represents the passage of time in the books, and not because it had grown too late for me to record yesterday. Let's keep going with the story, shall we? In the next book, A Court of Wings and Ruin, Feyre is in full spy mode, relaying information to the Night Court about the Spring Court through her mating bond with Rhysand. Eventually, she is forced to escape, though, and Azriel and Cassian, two of Rhysand's inner circle, come to rescue. Rhysand then calls a meeting of all the kings of all the courts to discuss the upcoming war with Hybern. They agree, and after a long series of political debates, Rhysand forms a few allies. The first of him to join in the battle were the Night and Summer Courts. Day, Dawn, and Winter come in later. In the final battle, the Autumn Court joins in, after, surprisingly, Tamlin himself pleads with them. Tamlin then comes to the rescue with some members of the Spring Court, a human army, and some seraphim, angel warriors. Eventually, even a few monsters from the darker aspects of the Night Court join in the battle. They eventually win, but Rhysand had to sacrifice himself. And the music is a joke once again. He is brought back to life in the same way Feyre was, and even Tamlin helped, reluctantly acknowledging Rhysand's sacrifice, and knowing that Feyre would be happier with Rhysand than with him. There's a fourth supplemental book, which I hear is decent, but I haven't read it yet, and it's not part of the main flow and doesn't have a huge amount of character development. It's like The Cursed Child. You could read it if you want, but it's really an added-on thing. What makes Rhysand a fantastic character is he starts out as a twisted villain, but it turns out it was a ruse to keep his people safe. The reader hates him at first. He lies. He is allied to the main villain. He betrays people, and is all in all portrayed as an evil character, and rightly so. He is pretty much evil in the first book. Even his visual persona resembles that of a traditional demon. He is definitely a character of darkness, being a part of the Night Court. His morality is often fluid, but in all, in the end, he is a good character. Over the course of the books, he changes from antagonist to supporting character to almost a protagonist, second only to Feyre herself. Honestly, he's sort of like Loki from the Avengers, but I digress. The journey the reader takes discovering who he truly is an amazing and fantastic one, easily one of the best parts of the series. In the end, no one can deny his sacrifice and overall goodness, not even his arch-nemesis Tamlin. Here are some quotes from Rhysand himself so you can better understand his character. Do you think I wouldn't become a monster to keep them protected? I would have waited 500 more years for you, 1,000 years, and if this is all the time we were allowed to have, the wait was worth it. This quote articulates the differences between him and Tamlin. He says to Feyre, "You might be my mate, but you remain your own person. You decide your own fate, your choices, not me. You chose yesterday, you choose every day, forever." It's this fundamental difference between Tamlin and Rhysand. Tamlin protects those he loves by taking control. Rhysand protects those he loves by sacrificing himself. Lastly, he talks about darkness, of which he himself is a symbol. There are different kinds of darkness. There is the darkness that frightens, the darkness that soothes, the darkness that is restful. There is the darkness of lovers and the darkness of assassins. It becomes what the bearer wishes it to be, needs it to be. It is not wholly bad or wholly good.